بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Respected listeners, dear teachers, we firstly thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing us with the blessing of Iman, and we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing us with health and with every ni'mah that He has blessed us with. فَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدُ وَالشُّكْرُ. This training session, inshallah, we're going to try to look at how to use Zoom in a madrasa setting, in a maktab setting. We're going to take this PowerPoint presentation through for almost an hour, maybe just under an hour, inshallah. And hopefully everyone can hear me, inshallah. If you can't, please do message in the comments that you can't hear me, or there's no sound coming. But I guess you won't be able to hear me saying this either. But in any case, hopefully if you can hear me, inshallah, you can message that you can hear, and that way we can know that we can begin. It will be covering a few areas. This presentation, this webinar, we will be covering a few areas. The first of which is going to be some privacy concerns. And I'm sure you probably heard of lots and lots of news articles with regard to Zoom, and many of them are rightly so. You know, they are real concerns that real users have, and yes, we should also have these concerns. However, there are some concerns which are being passed around which could easily be mitigated by using some of the settings that are provided by Zoom, and Zoom is doing a lot in trying to get the problems solved and sorted out. Now, I'm not an advocate of Zoom, but alhamdulillah, we've used Zoom for some time, and we just wanted to share and make it easier for those that can't or are not planning to switch over to any other platform. There are some that might be switching over to maybe Microsoft Teams, or maybe using other online teaching methodologies, technologies, sorry. However, if you are going to be staying with Zoom, then obviously it might be worthwhile taking a look at some of the bits of information that we can get from this webinar. So let's get started, and let's get going, inshallah. The first thing is the security implications. Now, you might have come to this presentation and this webinar thinking of the many issues and many articles that you might have read. The first of which you might have heard again and again is something called Zoom bombing. If you haven't heard of it, then Zoom bombing is something where unwanted and unknown users are able to get onto your classroom, your webinar, your meeting. The way they do this, in most cases, if not all, is where they found your link from somewhere. So the way Zoom works, and we'll go through how it works later on and how you can get that link. But if you've already done this, then Zoom bombing is where there's a link. That link has been shared and it has gotten into the wrong hands. When it gets into the wrong hands, then what they will try to do is they will come onto the class, and they will cause nuisance and cause problems for you, and that's what basically Zoom bombing is. So how do we protect ourselves from it? Like I mentioned, it happens when the link is in public. If you're going to be teaching your class in your maktab, in your madrasa, in your school, then that link should not be shared in any public area, on the public domain. It shouldn't be shared on your website. It shouldn't be shared in a WhatsApp group which has tons and tons of people who have nothing to do with that link. Now, it shouldn't be shared with all parents of the madrasa if it's only to do with one class. The link should be shared only to those people, with those people who are going to be taking part in that class. Secondly, there is some features that you can enable in case that link is shared by someone else to someone else, and they try to join in. Then you have the ability to control who comes into your class, and that is known as a waiting room, which is a feature that I will be showing you as well at a later point. In addition to that, if you know that you have 10 students in your class, 15 students in your class, 20 students in your class, and they have all joined now, then you can lock a lesson, a session, a meeting, and to prevent further people from joining that class. So in that manner, even if they have the link, they can try to join, but they won't be able to access the class because it has been locked, because the total number of people have already joined. Then there's the other problem, which is hacking. There has been some reports that some of the Zoom accounts have been hacked and they have been released on the dark web. And this is all news articles. And the reason I'm going through security implications first is because there might be people that have joined today with having heard and read, because Zoom has, from going from 10 million daily users to 200 million daily users, it's definitely, blown out of proportion, and everyone knows about it. So every issue that comes up is also very public. So you might have heard about it, you might have these concerns. So I just want to address some of these concerns before we actually go into the teaching. If I address them well enough and you feel that you want to continue using Zoom, then great and good. Inshallah, you can continue listening to the webinar. Otherwise, you can maybe have a look at different options that may be available for yourself. So hacking. Now with hacking, it's important that when you set up your account, then you set it up with a strong password. A password that is not easily guessable. You maybe use a password manager. So even you don't know the password, your password manager knows the password, enters it for you, and you're able to log into it every single time. So try to use strong passwords. Don't reuse your passwords. A lot of the times when accounts are hacked, then they try the same email and the same password which was used elsewhere for another account which was hacked. They try it out with popular services such as Zoom, and if it works, then great and good, and they will do whatever they want with it. So to prevent yourself from being hacked, try to use strong passwords, or shall I say you must use strong passwords, and don't reuse passwords that you've used before. I know it sounds very difficult, but now with the password managers being built into things like Google Chrome and Firefox, it's not terribly difficult to save it to your browser, and it stays in your computer for as long as you need it to be. So protect yourself from hacking in that way. If you do notice that you've been hacked or your account is being used in an unauthorized manner, then you need to report it to Zoom also and change your password, and hopefully that should prevent any hacking attempts and any problems that might come with it. Then there's public meetings. I've already alluded to it in Zoom bombing, but public meetings is one of the places, one of the ways in which you end up getting lots of nuisance and unwanted activity. If you want to have a public meeting, for example, if you're a masjid, you want to use Zoom for your maktab and for your masjid programs, then you shouldn't set up a Zoom meeting for that. You should actually do a webinar. A webinar is one way, and only the relevant people, so only the imam, for example, or 2-3 panelists will sit on the panel, and the rest of the people are just listening like a YouTube video, and they would be following on. They could raise their hand and ask questions, but that would be in a controlled manner. No one would be able to take over control of the screen, of the video, of the audio. The admin has the control for that. So if you wanted to have a public meeting, you must do it as a webinar. Zoom has a webinar option. You do need to pay a bit for that. It's a small amount, but you should opt for that option. But again, if you are going to have your class or something like that online, then don't make it public. That's the rule of thumb that we need to be following. Don't make it public, and if you do make it public, then you're going to have problems. And finally, one other thing I wanted to talk about, and obviously there's so many more, so I just put it under security issues. There are other issues that have come up, such as Windows passwords are being able to be hacked by hackers if they try through Zoom, and then on Mac, This was an old vulnerability that the camera could be switched on without the person's knowledge. And then there was something along the lines of the calls being routed through China unknowingly. So all of these issues, security issues that have come up. Now what Zoom is doing, I have been reading up, is that they are updating their app very regularly, as much as they can. And they've said they're stopping all of their feature updates, and they're going to fully focus, the entire workforce of Zoom is going to be fully focused on patching the issues and sorting out any bugs and any privacy concerns that people have. So that's that's what Zoom is doing. If we want to protect ourselves, then we need to keep our app up to date. As soon as the update is released for your desktop computer, your laptop, your phone, your tablet, wherever you're using Zoom from, you need to install that update instantly and straight away, immediately, for you to then be able to benefit from the changes, from the protections that are being offered in that update. So these are some of the security implications. There might be others which I've missed out, but I feel that there's quite a lot that we can talk about on this. But hopefully, if you do want to continue using Zoom, then this might provide you with some reassurance that it is still somewhat safe to do so. But you need to take your precautions, which is very important. At the end of the day, human error can lead to many problems beyond the errors that come with the software that we're going to be using. And then we have the second level, which I want to discuss. And I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in safeguarding, but being a teacher myself, having gone through safeguarding trainings many times, just some points to consider. I just want to put it out there for you to discuss with your safeguarding leads, with your safeguarding managers, the LADO, whoever you want to talk to in your area, in your city, in your locality. You need to just have this discussion about these particular points. So first thing is, we need to train our staff. We need to train them how to use that software, how to use Zoom if you're going to be using it, how to correctly use the settings that are offered in Zoom. So if we don't provide training, you're going to run into not only technical issues, but also safeguarding issues. You're going to maybe have the videos being turned on accidentally. You might have the chat being made public. Maybe the link is being shared publicly by the teacher without having too much knowledge of it. So there's lots of issues that could come up, safeguarding issues, if we don't train our staff adequately. So it's important that you have a Zoom meeting if you want, because you can't get together now. Have a Zoom meeting of your own with your staff. You need to get one competent member of your maktab, your madrasa, your school, who is able to navigate their way around Zoom and technology, to be able to then go through and explain to the teachers the features that the madrasa, the maktab, the school is going to be using in Zoom, how to use it, maybe even create short videos and share them with the teacher for your particular context. It's very easy and good to share. There are lots of videos on YouTube, on Zoom's account, telling you all the different bits on the different features. Maybe get them together in a small WhatsApp message, a list, share it with your teachers and follow up and ask if they've been through them. So it's very important to train your staff in order to prevent any technical issues and also any safeguarding issues. Additionally, we need to communicate clearly with parents. We need to let the parents know that we're going to be teaching online. The method of teaching is going to be Zoom. And when we teach online, then we're going to only use audio, for example. I've seen there are some people that are using video as well, but many people have navigated away from this, and they've moved away from using video because of many issues that could come up with that. There's the issue of the background of the child, the family being there, lots of different things. The child's video itself being made available not only to the teacher, but to every other child that is also watching. So if there's any parents around the children, then they are also watching the children, the rest of the children that are on that particular Zoom classroom. So there's these considerations to make, but when you have video. But you must communicate clearly with the parents what methods you're going to be using to connect with the students, what times you're going to request them to be online, how they're going to connect. So the method of connecting, you might have parents that are not literate enough to help their children. You might need to assist them over the phone step by step, telling them how to join once, twice, and maybe after that they will get used to it. So looking after those, so that's part of your risk assessment as well, where you need to see that those children that are unable to access the internet, unable to access devices or enough devices, or unable to access it because of or due to the lack of ICT literacy, digital literacy. All of these things you need to consider. Again, this slide here is all about considerations that you need to make when organizing an online class. So communicate all of this clearly to the parents. Give them tutorials, online tutorials, some links to the YouTube videos about how to join. Again, the link for them to join the classroom should only be shared directly to the parent of that particular class only, and no one else. So all of these. Now, video I've already covered, the third point, but talking about recording. Zoom also offers the option of recording the sessions for the teacher and also for the students. Now, this setting you need to be sure of. By default, recording is off. However, you do need to make sure of that. It's not that it will always be off. It could be that someone might have switched it on. You're not sure about, you don't know. So go and check it out yourself. The recording should be off for the teacher and for the student. The way recording works in Zoom, if you're not paying for it, and I'm pretty sure most of us are not going to be paying for it, we're using the free account and getting an extension of the unlimited time. So normally it's 40 minutes, but you can apply for that time limit to be extended if it's not already done by default now. But that's another matter. So when the recording is done on the free account, it's saved on the teacher's computer. It's saved on the teacher's computer, and we need to consider GDPR, safeguarding, risk assessment, and all of those things in those situations. Beyond that, we've got the recording going to Zoom. If you're paying for the access to Zoom's online cloud servers, then it's going to Zoom. Then again, you need to have those considerations, and you need to basically think about the risk assessment for that also. Final 2 points is the settings on the Zoom app that will protect the children and protect the teachers also. Then we've got the Zoom website. So the app has only limited settings, but majority of the settings that you can set by default are on the website, which we're going to look at later on, inshallah, today. So what I will do is I think we'll go onto the website for now and the app, go through how to do it, and then we'll talk about the next one, which is practical tips on how to use Zoom. So if I just close out of here, and if I go onto Zoom, when you log in, then this is the screen that you will be presented. And on this screen, you've got a few options. You've got on the right hand side right here, you've got the meetings that will be coming up today. At the moment I don't have any, but anything that you've scheduled in advance, you're going to be getting from here. You can schedule it by clicking on schedule, and you can give it a name, the date, time, the ending date and time. Is it a recurring meeting? Is it going to happen again and again? So that way, you know, we can make sure that it's the same meeting ID for each time. Then we've got a meeting password. By default, what Zoom has done is that any meeting that is created has a password by default. So will your meeting have a password by default? Yes or no? You can set the password yourself and give that password to that particular class to add a layer of protection once again. And then if we go into advanced options, then you'll see a few more options here. I was talking about the waiting room before. The way the waiting room works is that the children will sign on with that link, but they won't be admitted in the class until the teacher manually admits them in. That way, if there is any unwanted people, then you will be able to filter them out. Enable join before host. So can the students join before the host? When they join before the host, before the teacher, that means that they can start talking to each other if their audio is activated. If you let this setting, if you switch the setting on, and then that's before the teacher starts. So they're in the class. If you take the example of a classroom, you know, they're sitting in the class, the teacher hasn't walked in yet, and they could do whatever they want until the teacher comes. Mute participants on entry, and this we'll talk about in the practical tips. I think it could be practical to mute the participants as soon as they enter, and then unmute them when you want to start listening to them. Only authenticated users can join Zoom. Now this option here requires a Zoom account. If you wanted, if you wanted everyone to join as easily as possible, you don't want this option ticked. But if you do know that everyone has a Zoom account, then you can add them in, and you can tick this option. They can log into their account, then only can they access the webinar, the class. They won't be able to access without a link. Normally with Zoom, if you have a link, you can access it as long as you have the app. You don't need to create an account or anything like that. And finally, as you can see, this option over here, automatically record meeting on the local computer. As this is a free plan, so it will be on the local computer. It won't go to Zoom, and by default you can switch that on, or by default you can have it off. So once you're ready, you click on schedule, and that's the lesson ready, and it will come up over here. If you wanted to create a new meeting, there's two ways. If you do it from this screen over here, and on an app it will be at the bottom. On the app, you'll have a menu bar at the bottom. The 4 icons will be at the top, if I'm not mistaken, and then there will be a few icons at the bottom. These top ones here that you see, some of those will be at the bottom on the app, on the mobile phone. If you click new meeting here, it creates a new meeting ID every single time you click that button. On this button here, which I'm not going to click at the moment, but if you go in there, it will show you something called personal meeting ID. A personal meeting ID is the ID that stays the same for your account at all times. That's the ID for that particular account, and you can start a meeting at any time, and anyone with that link can join at any time using the same link. It could be 1 month later, 10 months later, or tomorrow. So that's through meetings. You click on meetings, and then under personal meeting ID there will be a start button. You click on start, and you're able to then begin the lesson. Then we've got the next part, which is the meeting itself. So if I go into the meeting, click on new meeting, and by default it will start connecting. The camera will be off because that's the way that we've set it up from the settings on the website. A lot of the times you'll have children saying or parents saying that they can't hear you or you can't hear them. That's all to do with computer audio or join with computer audio. So if I go here and leave computer audio, this is what happens when the audio permission has not been given. It says join audio. When you click on join audio, it says join with computer audio, or on a mobile phone it will say join with device audio. So we click on join with computer audio, and you will see that the mic starts working, and you will be able to start hearing the people that the students that have joined that meeting as well. Similarly, on the start video, you can start by clicking and it will start the video off. We want to look at a few features on this particularly. So before we can start the lesson itself, let's look at manage participants. On the participants, we'll be able to see everyone that has joined this meeting. There are a few settings for these, for this section, and we're going to look at those right now. You can select to mute participants on entry if you haven't already done that. Allow participants to unmute themselves. So if that's ticked, that means if you mute them, they can still unmute themselves. If you untick that, then if you've muted them, they have to stay muted until you, as the teacher, unmute them. And that might be a wise option. Play enter exit chime, so that's just a bit of a notification that you joined and left. Allow participants to rename themselves, some simple point. Lock meeting, this is what I was talking about before. Once you know that you have 15 students in your class and you don't expect any more students to be joining, you click on lock meeting, it will lock the meeting and no more members will be able to join. And then we've got the last one here, put participants in the waiting room on entry. If that setting hasn't been already switched on, then you can tick it, you can click it over here and it will activate it, and students will go into a waiting room. When in the waiting room, under participants, you'll see the names of the students, and under each one you will see the button called admit or admit all. Admit is if you click on the particular student and click admit, it brings that student into the class. And if you do admit all, then all of those students will join at once. All of the students that are waiting will join at once in the class, and they will have access to whatever you're showing them or teaching them or saying to them. Then we have a chat option. Now this chat option is something that you want to consider whether you want to have it or not. If you have switched off their audio, but they want some help, you can have a chat option. And the chat option, you have some settings. The setting is participant can chat with no one, host only, or everyone publicly. So we would say host only in this case, to say they can only send to the teacher and not between themselves, and it's not a public chat. So every time they send a message, it will only come to you and not anyone else. But if you send a message, then you can reply individually to that person and also to everyone if you wish. And finally, on this meeting part of things, I want to show you share screen. Now, share screen is where you can actually share whatever is on your screen. There's a few options here. First, you have obviously your desktop. It shows everything that's on your desktop. But there are other options if you want to. If you have an iPad, for example, or an iPhone, or I'm not sure if it works with Android, but if you have an iPad, you want to write some Arabic words and you want to use the Draw app. You can connect it with the computer with the cable. Click on iPhone or iPad, and you can actually show them your iPad. You can select whiteboard. Let's look at whiteboard. On whiteboard, once you've selected that, you click on share, and you'll see that you have an actual whiteboard which you are actually sharing with the students, and you can write anything here. You can show them something by drawing it out, by circling something, etc. You get the point. It's very easy and simple. If I close that out and click on share screen once again, I can individually share the particular windows that I have open on my screen also. If I have these windows, and I share just the PowerPoint, then just the PowerPoint will be shared. I can be doing anything else on my computer on top of PowerPoint as well, but it will not show that. It will only show what's on PowerPoint. There are some advanced options. If you do feel that you want to check those out, you can share a portion of the screen, just one half of it. The other half of it you keep blank, for example, or you do some of your own work. And if you want to share files from these sources, then you can share those as well. If you want to share an audio, then you might need to click on share computer sound. If you don't click share computer sound, then your computer audio, so that means any video that you're playing or anything of that sort, will not go through properly. And share screen optimization makes it a bit easier for the sharing to happen. And that's basically the meeting part of it. If you do want to record, that's where you record from. Yes, let's talk about the invite link. If you wanted to invite the students, you will get your link here. Obviously, I've locked it, so I won't get it. But if I get unlocked, if I click on email, it comes up with actually some options here already. I can send it via email, or I could copy the URL or copy the invitation. So if I copy the URL, the invitation is the whole long message. The URL is just the link, and the password is there, so the password will also be shared. So if I paste it just in the chat box, and you'll be able to see that link. This is the link. It's got the password in it as well. All you need to do is send this link to the particular students who need to be joining that particular lesson, and once they've clicked it, they will be joining your lesson. Let's close this, end this meeting. When you click on end meeting, there's a few options. There's leave meeting or end meeting for all. If you leave meeting, then the meeting continues, but you leave. Someone else is made the host. If you do end meeting for all, then all of the students' meetings are closed out, and they won't be able to continue with that particular meeting. If you have any questions about that part, then do let us know, inshallah, and we'll try to answer those questions. Now, very quickly, I'll go on to the settings. So if I quickly go to Zoom, on Zoom, we've got some settings here. If we log into your account, once you've logged into your account, on the left-hand side, you'll see personal and admin. We'll talk about that in a moment. But we've got meeting settings, which is the most important. Then you've got recording, and telephone is most probably not needed. When you schedule a meeting, by default, on this particular account, my account, not all the accounts that are under my account, but just my account. Do I want to have, what defaults do I want to have? That's what this page is for. So do I want the host video to be on or off? So I've selected mine to be off by default. Participants video by default is off. And audio should be computer or telephone. It could be either, so it's easier. Then join before host, again by default. So you're setting default settings here. And these default settings are then used every single time that you start a meeting off. Makes it easier for you. You just have to click and start, and you don't have to worry about the settings. Use personal meeting ID when starting an instant meeting. So if you remember, I said this button here that starts a meeting instantly, straight away. That is an instant meeting. If you go to meetings tab at the top or at the bottom on your mobile phone, then that is a personal meeting ID. But this here is called an instant meeting. So do you want every instant meeting to start with your personal meeting ID? If you remember, I told you the benefit of a personal meeting ID is that it doesn't change. It stays the same, and staying the same means that you can have the same link that can be shared, and it will be, and I can tell you the benefit of that at a later point, inshallah. Now, only authenticated users, if you have a Zoom account, again, then only you can join any of the meetings that I start. So you can start that off if you want. Authenticated users from the web client, require password, so that's by default, it's on. Require password for instant meetings, again, that's on. You can switch these off so that there's no password needed. Then we've got, for personal meetings as well, is password on. Embed the password in the meeting link. So if you remember, when I clicked on invite, you saw a password at the end of it, PWG equals, and then a long line of characters, which was the password. So that password, should it be automatically copied when you copy the link or not? That's this setting over here. And that's what you would want, unless you want to give the password separately to the link. And then asking for a password when the students join by phone. We've got mute participants upon entry. If you want to mute them by default, you're going to want to switch that on. If you want to send a reminder, you can switch that on. Whilst you're in the meeting, then a few other settings that you've got. So require encryption. This is again for protection. And if you're going to start this setting up, you're going to have to fill out some other particular settings elsewhere. But it should protect your communication. Enable the chat, enable private chat, auto saving of chats, file transfer, feedback to Zoom. All of this is whilst you're running the meeting. What settings do you want for that? I'm not going to bore you by going through all of this. Should you allow annotation, the whiteboard, remote control? Should you allow that? Lots and lots of different things. Breakout room. A breakout room is where you can create smaller rooms. Where if you want to say one teacher and 5 students go there, if you have 2 teachers for a class, a teacher and teaching assistants, 1 teacher and 5 students go in one part of the class, and the other teacher and the other 5 students stay in one part of the class, you call a breakout room, have a small discussion, and then join back together. If you want to switch that on, use that functionality, then great, otherwise keep it switched off. Then we've got lots of virtual background. You can switch that off because if you're using a video, then you switch it on. If you're not using video, then you switch it off. We've got waiting room. There's a waiting room feature. You can switch that on by and if you, I think by default at the moment Zoom has made it switched on. You can switch it off if you want to. Then there won't be a waiting room, but ideally you should have a waiting room. Now moving on, this is sort of the invitation and lots of different settings for that. For recording, just a few settings for that, and it won't take too long, inshallah. For recording, you've got do you want a recording or not? Local recording, yes or no? Should it be automatic? Should you display a disclaimer for it or not? And multiple audio notifications of recorded meeting. That's it. These are a few settings you can take a look through about recording, and that's about it. Moving on, quick one now, inshallah. We've got user management. I did mention to you personal meeting IDs, and for user management is going to be useful to you if you're the admin and you want to create multiple accounts under you. If you create multiple accounts under your account, then you are able to control the default settings of those accounts as well. When you click on users, you actually have to enter your credit card or debit card details just to verify yourself. They don't actually charge you, but if you don't enter them, you don't get the functionality of users. But once you have the users functionality, if I load it up, you'll see that it will load up all the users in my database under my name, and there's none, it's just myself. You can add multiple users. To add multiple users, you type their email address there, and when you type their email address, then you'll be able to enter them into your account. You can put them with commas. It actually invites them. When it invites them, they have to go into their email, create their own password. You don't have to enter their password or anything like that. And once that's done, the settings for that are going to be under account management and account settings. So when you have multiple users, one of the practical tips is if you have a class which has multiple teachers for that one class, then you create an account for the class. For example, class 1 at whatever your organization name.com. And that way, two teachers can access that same account. So for the students, it's only one link. I hope you understand what I'm saying. But for the students, it's only one link to click because that link takes them to this particular account. And both teachers are using the same account to teach at their respective times. That's the benefit of having user management as well. Now here you see the account settings, settings that you want to use as a default for all the accounts under your account. And you can see an additional icon here, the lock icon. The lock icon is, if I click this lock, then that setting will not be changeable by any of the users under my account. It does say you should let the users know that you've done this, so that they know that, you know, if they do want it changed, they have to come to you as the admin to get it changed. In any case, that's the icon. Again, the settings are all going to be pretty much the same. I'm not going to bore you by going through all of this, but you have the extra lock icon, and you can set all of those settings that we looked at before here as well. But this by default will be for all the accounts under your account, and not just for your account itself. And that's where I will end about Zoom, inshallah. We're going to spend just a little bit more time on the final part of my presentation, which was practical tips. Now, practical tips, we're going to use, I have mentioned already, use waiting rooms. One of the ways that some madrasas have been using waiting rooms for hifz is that they tell two students to be connected so that the teacher doesn't have to keep waiting in between. So the two students stay connected in the waiting room, and one student continues reciting to the teacher. Once that student has finished, the teacher will admit the next student into the classroom, and all the students are given their times when they have to start connecting and be in the waiting room. That way, the teacher can continue teaching and admit the next student and listen to them, and the teacher knows that they are attending right now and they are waiting to recite, and the students are also ready on time without any problems. Another practical tip, like I mentioned, mute all microphones by default. That way, because in a classroom you can have 20 students talking at once, you can still make sense of some of it. But if you have 20 students at once talking through one speaker of yours in your computer, then you're not going to be able to make any sense of anything. So that's why by default it would be advisable to have muted all microphones, and then say, right, Muhammad, right, Khadija, right, and then you unmute their mics as you're talking to them. Obviously, you can say Assalamu alaikum, everyone responds, or everyone becomes quiet. The younger they are, the harder it will be to manage their behavior online. And for that, you need to keep the lessons short. You cannot expect to have a full 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hour session where you are expecting the children to be attentive, to listen to you, to answer to your questions, to focus. It's not going to be possible. So we have to be practical, keep your lessons short, especially for the younger years. For the younger years, some of the teachers I've spoken to have been saying that they don't actually have the whole class on at once. They get given times, 5 students, 3, 4 students at a time. And once the teacher has taught them, has listened to their lesson, then those 5 students get cut off. They go and they continue learning. The parents have been advised to continue assisting and helping them in that learning, but they do not continue being on that lesson because they won't be able to focus for 1 whole hour, even 45 minutes or half an hour if you're going to teach them for that long. So we need to keep that in mind. Also, we need to be a bit more considerate and careful in the language that we use, in the way that we communicate to them, because this is a completely different environment for us as teachers. It is very difficult for us as teachers to get used to this whole thing, to keep them engaged, to teach them what is required, to get the work from them, and to get them to learn properly at home when they know they don't have to face you. They only have to maybe connect with you virtually. So it's a difficult time for us as teachers, and it's equally difficult for students. Some of the students, they might even have bereavements in their family. They might be going through some families might have people that are ill. So there's lots of issues that the children will also be facing. It's new for them also, for them to be there, not in front of a teacher and in front of a screen, instead to try to listen to a lesson rather than play an interactive game. It's a very different environment. So we have to try to be considerate in this regard, and keep our lessons short, teach them in an engaging manner, which we'll look at in the last point, inshallah, and allow for activities to be completed later. Don't expect all the activities to be done whilst you're online with them. Allow for them to do it later on. Maybe you have a madrasa, maktab, or a school email address, which is not private email address, that you can give, and you can then have them email it over or send it over, or you have a madrasa WhatsApp number that the parents are able to WhatsApp the work over to. Whatever the solution is, you can have a look at that, but give them time to do it later on. It might not be done straight away, it might not be done immediately, it might not be done in front of you, but if they do need some support, they can ask you, give them enough time for that. And finally, the teaching methodology. Whilst teaching online, it's going to be very different. So we need to try to use encouraging and engaging methods. So we might have to bring up some puzzles that keeps them engaged. We might have to give them a story. We might have to, like I mentioned, mute all microphones and address the children by name and unmute the microphone for them to respond to that. You might even need to look at some online platforms which have quizzes and which have questions that you can set for them that they can do, and it's auto-marked. Google Forms actually has an option like that. You can create a Google form with questions which can be auto-marked for you. So setting up these new kinds of activities which we might not have done before. Additionally, if you're going to be teaching them online some Islamic studies lessons, you're not going to expect them to sit there and watch a blank screen. Or maybe even if your video's on, then just watch you. We need to have a presentation ready, some information available, so that they are able to see something visually as well as hear it from you whilst you're teaching them. So we do need to look at different methods of teaching. There won't be the same method that we used in class will not necessarily be working very well when teaching online. So these are just some tips, and this is by no means a conclusive or the definitive guide to using Zoom online, but hopefully it gives us some encouragement and some assistance in how to do things and how to use these technologies online technologies to teach these classes online. Again, I want to reiterate, it is difficult. It's not going to be easy. You are going to run into challenges. I had a call yesterday or day before from a teacher again asking, what are you guys doing? How am I supposed to, keep 6-year-olds engaged in a Quran lesson? And that's a difficult question, but we can only give suggestions from what we've heard other teachers doing, and whether that's worked or not, that's another question, and that's something that we have to try to know if it works with our students or not. Having smaller classes, giving them time slots to say you join at this time, you join at that time, and it's going to be more work. But if we want to continue educating our children, protecting their deen, then inshallah, through some practice, through some trials, we will be able to get to it at some point, within a week, within 2 weeks, get good at it, make some changes based on our findings, and we will be then able to inshallah, deliver some good lessons to our students online. Now, I'd like to take some questions, inshallah. We've already received some questions, so I'm going to answer those questions. I've received about 4 questions already. If there's any other questions that you do have, you might have had the numbers already shared in the comments that you can message on that number, and inshallah I'll try to answer those questions. So question 1, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How would a madrasa manage a Zoom account? Meaning, can multiple teachers access one account at once to teach different classes? Well, they won't be able to access. So let's take a look. Yeah, we'll break this question down. How does a madrasa manage a Zoom account? So the madrasa will create one admin Zoom account. The admin Zoom account will not be used to teach. You can use it to teach, but you won't generally use that to teach. Then every teacher, you create a Zoom account for them. You create a separate Zoom account, like I mentioned. Let me show you actually. If I go into my settings, I can go to user management, and I can create a multiple users under this. If I click on add users, and it will open up a pop-up. It will give me the option to enter the email addresses of all the users that I want to, with a comma in between. I can add multiple. It will invite those users. It won't actually create them. It will invite them, and they then click on a link that they get in their email and create a password for themselves. If you're going to manage all of that, then you can just click on those accounts. If you own those accounts, you can click on the links in the accounts, create the passwords, and share those with the teachers to say, this is your email address, this is your password, and give it to them. Question, the last bit is actually important. Can you use one account to teach at once, multiple teachers at once? One account can only be used once at one time, meaning you can't have 2 teachers using the same account at the same time. Obviously, in a class, you wouldn't have 2 teachers teaching 2 different subjects at the same time. If you use that as an example, then that makes it easy for us to understand. Qur'an teacher is different, so Qur'an teacher will log into class 1 at organizationname.com at 5 o'clock. At 5:55 they log out, or even if they don't log out, they know that the time has ended, it's finished, lesson is finished. At 6 o'clock, you leave a 5-minute gap just to make sure, if someone does go over time. Then at 6 o'clock, the second teacher for Islamic studies will log in, same email address, class 1 at organizationname.com, same password they've used, and the first user will actually get logged out automatically when the second user logs into that same account. That's only if you have 2 teachers for one class. But if you have multiple classes and 1 teacher for each class, then you just have to create one account for those teachers, and all of those at once can be teaching because they're all using their own individual accounts and not one particular account. Question number 2, can parents also access the different classes if they have more than one sibling? If they have more than one device, and for example you have class 1 and class 2, child 1 and child 2, then you've sent the link, class 1 link to them as well, and class 2 link to them. On device 1, they access class 1. On device 2, they access class 2. That's not a problem, and they can do that even if it's in the same madrasa. Question 3, can you use Zoom to record classes? Can you record classes on Zoom and view later for quality assurance and teachers' feedback? Now, with recordings, as I've mentioned, you'll have to consider the safeguarding, GDPR, you'll have to consider risk assessments and all of that. If you have all of that in place, you can record it. But when you record it, there's 2 options. If you're paying Zoom, then the option will be Zoom will be saving it on Zoom servers. Now, there's separate considerations to be made for that. And if you're not paying for Zoom and you're using the free option, then it won't be saved on Zoom servers. It will actually be saved on the individual devices of the teacher that is actually teaching that lesson. So whether they have space on their computer, that's another matter. The recording being on their computer is also something that you have to consider. You will have to get it from them. For quality assurance, if you want to keep it, you have the right processes in place, then it is a possibility, but you will have to discuss that with your DSL, designated safeguarding lead. And finally, for feedback as well, they're saying for question 3. So yes, for feedback, you might say to the teachers, tell them in advance, don't just pop into the class, but say to the teacher that I might be joining your lesson, just to observe how it goes and to see if I can provide you with any feedback. Would you mind? And the teacher, I'm sure, won't mind. You join that class and mute your mic or whatever, and just observe the ongoings of the lesson, and you can provide feedback like that if you wish. And final question, I haven't received any more, and time is coming to an end, so inshallah, final question. How can you increase the time limit to more than 40 minutes for a class on Zoom? Now, how do we do that? Well, the way to do that is actually, if you Google it, because I don't know the exact link for that, but if you Google it to say Google extend Zoom limit for education, extend Zoom limit for education, something along those lines. There's a form that you have to fill in. It's a very simple form you have to fill in. You have to use your organization email address. It can't be at Hotmail or Gmail or something like that. You need to use an organization email address and fill it in. And it might take a day or two to get for them to respond. Sometimes it happens straight away. Sometimes it doesn't. You just have to chase them up, and they will then eventually extend it. When they do extend it, you just get a notification like a green bar at the top of your account when you log in that tells you that it's been extended. Although in the settings and everything, it'll still show you that you're still on a basic account. We actually have had a fifth question. Let's quickly take that, inshallah. How does this work then? So, for example, a madrasa creates an admin account and multiple accounts under that for their staff. Now, each class have a separate meeting link. How does this work and how do you set this up? Does the admin do this? And then the teacher using their own account joins the meeting at the correct time. Okay, so let's quickly give you a scenario. And the scenario would be that I am the admin. I want to create an account. So I go here. I've created an account to say class 1 at organizationname.com. I've created the account, and then I go to my email address. On my email address, I got a link from Zoom. Now, with Zoom link, I clicked on it, and it asked me to create a password. I created a password. Password was set to a nice secure password, and now, as the admin, I share this with the class 1 teacher to say, class 1 teacher, here's your email address to say class1 at organizationname.com, and here's your password that you need to be logging in with. Now, class 1, as the admin, I need to go into that class 1 account, and when I go into the class 1 account, I will get a link in my profile. So if I go into my profile, I will get a link, and again, that's called the personal meeting ID, which you can also get if you're on the app. You can also get it from the meetings section. It's called personal meeting ID. You copy that. It says there share invitation or copy URL. It is a link that you copy, and once you've copied that link, the invitation link, does not need to be shared with the teacher. It needs to be shared with the parent of that particular class, of class 1, the parent of class 1 for that student. You give them that link to say, this is your link to log in. Now, there's a few things. We've got number 1, the class 1 account for the teacher. We've got the class 1 link for the student. The student just gets given the link, the parent gets given the link. The teacher then decides, okay, I need to teach at 5 o'clock. The teacher comes to the Zoom app and logs in with their account. At the same time, the student at their house will go at 5 o'clock on their device and click on that link that they've been given. When the teacher logs in, they will have to, if you've shared a personal meeting ID, they cannot start a meeting, an instant meeting from here. They will have to start a meeting from meetings, because a personal meeting will have a personal meeting ID. A meeting from here, meeting IDs will continuously change from the instant meetings. So they go to meetings, they start the meeting off, and they will see the class starting up. Now, a very common problem is the student has logged in, called the admin up and said, look, I've joined, and the teacher's screen is showing that waiting for the host to join. Waiting for the host to join. If that's happened, and the teacher's telling you they've joined, the student's saying that I can't see the teacher, then it's most probably because the teacher started the meeting off from new meeting ID over here, instant meeting, and they did not start it from meetings at the top, which is the personal meeting ID. Personal meeting ID, remember, never changes. A new meeting always continues to change. What you want to share with the parents is a personal meeting ID, and that way the meeting ID will remain the same for a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, however long you're going to be teaching for, and you don't need to access it from here. If you are technical and you do set it up in the settings to say, if I showed it to you before, let's quickly go to account management and account settings. If I go into here, and if you do set it up, it's just one setting. If you do set it up that way, it does solve a lot of problems. And it says here, use personal meeting ID when scheduling a meeting. And also use personal meeting ID when starting an instant meeting. That's the one actually. You click on this, you switch this on, and you will see that it will actually then, when you turn this on, it will always create, even if they start an instant meeting here, it will always start with a personal meeting ID. It will solve you a lot of problems, inshallah. Hope that sort of explained the process that you need to go through in order to set up an account for the teachers and share it with them, and a link for the students and share it with them as well. I hope I've been able to answer those questions. If you do have any questions, then you can message on the numbers again, and we'll try to get in touch with you separately. Jazakumullah khairah for tuning in. It has been a pleasure. Please remember us in your du'as. Allah protect us all from this virus and from all illness. Allahumma inna na'udhu bika min al-baras wal-junun wal-judham wa min sayyi al-asqam. Allah protect us from every illness, every kind of evil, every kind of harm that is out there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to see this through and come out of it at the other end enlightened and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.